Welcome to the Unfiltered Podcast with me, Nyima Jadama, here on our Alex Studios in Berlin. The Unfiltered Podcast is actually a space where impactful and real stories meet fearless voices. This episode is actually part of our special threefold interview series that is actually giving Africa a new image in partnership with the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom in South Africa. In this threefold series, we will actually be spotlighting both change makers who are actually reshaping narratives of Africa from the inside out, one innovation at a time. Today's guest is actually the definition of reinvention. Itu Mamasedi, a South African entrepreneur, technologist, and creative visionary, leading the future of beauty through artificial intelligence with his company, Eyam Skincare and Wellness. Itu is actually not just transforming how we approach skincare in Africa, he's actually building tools that use AI to meet the needs of real people with real stories and in real times. In today's conversation, we would look at about the evolution of entrepreneurs, about his entrepreneurial journey, the rise and fall of his streamlined startup, Stremundo, and how he is using tech to promote wellness and empowerment. We will definitely also explore the power of failure, resilience, and why Africa is a fertile ground for innovation that puts people first. If you think this interview already interests or excites you, grab a tea, get comfortable, because this conversation is something that you don't want to miss. Herzlich willkommen zum Unfiltered Podcast mit mir, Nyima Jadama, in unserer Alex Berlin Studios. Unser heutiger Gast ist eine Definition, eine neue Erfinder. Itu Mamasedi, ein südafrikanischer Unternehmer, Technologie- und kreativer Visionär, führt die Zukunft der Schönheit durch künstliche Intelligenz mit seinem Unternehmer Eyam Skincare und Wellness an. Mehr über Mamasedi und seine innovative Arbeit erfahren Sie hier. Bleiben Sie dran. Thank you very much, Itu, for joining me to discuss about reinventing beauty and tech through AI, innovation, and resilience in Africa's digital economy. How are you?
Thank you so much, Nyima. I'm excited. It's really inspiring seeing the work that you're doing. I really also am just taking this opportunity to just, share that not just our own journey as Eyam Skincare and Wellness, but also what other founders are going through on the continent, how we see this era that we are in, just like the rest of the world. African startups and startup founders are going all in on artificial intelligence. We think that it gives superpowers to small teams like ours. And we think it's also a great time to think about trade and investment on the African continent. So I'm excited to talk about this with you.
I'm excited to have you as well, and I so much look forward to this conversation with you. Itu, tell us more about the Eyam Skincare and Wellness. Actually, how did the journey started, and of course, what problems are you trying to solve through AI, and how does NI enhance the experience of your customers?
Well, Eyam is a Zulu word. isiZulu is one of the South African languages, and it means it is mine. What we really were trying to do when we started the company was to really focus on clean and personalized skincare. Particularly on the African continent, the use case is interesting because South Africa is the largest skincare market on the African continent. But you have a huge infiltration of products that are really low quality products. So that's the first problem that we've got. Number two, we solve the challenge of educating the consumer. The ordinary consumer doesn't really understand 90% of what's on the ingredient label. So in our marketing and in our comms, what we do is we take big jargon and we boil it down to really understandable concepts so that the consumer understands what they're using. Really clear in our packaging, what are parabens. The education bit is really important for our brand. We also solve, of late, as you well mentioned, just the use case of artificial intelligence in skincare.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that one of the tools that we are developing in-house is a skin analysis tool. Yeah. And we did a bit of a trial at the beginning of the year to just see whether people want to use this or not. And we still find that on the African continent, there's a lot of education to go into AI still. But people are almost using AI, and it's becoming almost second nature to use AI for what product should I use because I've got a dark patch on my cheek. And those are really interesting use cases for us. Of course, we're still in the development stages of this, but we really think that this equalizes the market for us startups. And if you think about what the possibilities are in terms of what computer vision combined with artificial intelligence can do, is if we can analyze the skin of a person really using the selfie camera on the device of the consumer, what are the other potential use cases for this other thing in terms of discovery of any skin anomalies? We really are excited about that. So we see this not just as a skincare solution, but we think that there's a healthcare vertical that's possible for us. And based on the feedback that we got, we thought we would just build a tool that would help people find the right products. But we think that the opportunity is actually much larger than that. So that's a thing that we really, really are excited about. But in a nutshell, that's who we are as Eyam Skincare. Those are the problems that we solve. And I think that's the opportunity we are working our hardest at, because we really are excited to join the global, as it were, gold rush in artificial intelligence.
Yeah. If you said like using AI to make skin products, this is the first time when I heard, I was like, okay, that's quite interesting. We will deep dive into that. However, your transition or your journey spans music, tech, wellness, and now AI that we just talked about. What actually or originally inspired you to become an entrepreneur?
Well, I think I'm one of the fortunate few, because truly, while in South Africa we are classified as the most unequal society in the entire world, so the unemployment rate in South Africa is scarily high. I have always been exposed to entrepreneurial opportunities from a very young age. So because of the fact that entrepreneurship is almost second nature to me, I am wired to spot opportunities, and I am really wired as a self-starter. So my real talent is understanding how to assemble teams, understanding opportunities, also understanding when the lifetime of an opportunity has passed by. And I think you mentioned it earlier about startups failing, and I know a lot of that because Tremodo is not the only startup of mine that's failed. There's a lot of them. But so I can't really say I was inspired to entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship has always been second nature. And I think that if you think about entrepreneurship as really the ability of a founder to identify if there is a gap in the market and identify whether there is a market in that gap, put together a team that can address the gap in the market in the quickest, most efficient, if you can, most cost-effective way for the market, then you've got a winning formula there. So for me, entrepreneurship, I come from that school of thought of entrepreneurship to say South Africa has massive problems In education, there are massive problems. In healthcare, there are massive problems. So we don't have a shortage of problems. We just have a shortage of people to solve the problems. So really, that is what has kept me going in my entrepreneurship journey throughout the different industries that one has been in, is to identify that there is a problem there and assemble a team that can best solve this problem. So I think that I believe I speak for many, many other entrepreneurs on the African continent who understand the nature, the temperature, the type of problems that only can be understood if you are part of the community that experiences the problems, because then you understand what is the most effective way to go about solving these problems. So for many of us, it's really the fact that there are abundant problems, and for a long time, Africa has been forgotten. So as entrepreneurs and as self-starters, then we take it upon ourselves to build businesses and companies and teams around these problems to try and solve them, and perhaps in the process make a bit of a profit.
Yeah. You made mention of like entrepreneurship is for you, it's like a second thing or a talent. This is not your first startup. You actually transitioned from being an award-winning record executive to building an AI-powered beauty solution. How did that shift happen, and what sparked your interest in the skincare and wellness space?
Well, if I understand what you're saying well, is what the transition was from Streamodo, which was my last startup. So let me just do a quick background on Streamodo. When in my background in the music and entertainment industries, I got very interested in what Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer to a certain extent were doing. And we didn't have a lot of streaming applications in Africa. There were some, but there weren't many. So myself and my former co-founder, who was the technical co-founder of the company, went and started building a streaming company. So, I don't know if we were brilliant or naive or stupid or genius, but we sincerely believed that we could take Apple Music on. We believed that we could take Spotify on, and so we spent a lot of money in the process building the platform. But it turned out that it would be too difficult to dislodge the hold that between Spotify and Apple Music they collectively have on the music industry. You're not solving one problem for the artists and the musicians who are making the music. On the other hand, you're solving the tech problem, and you're solving the distribution problem. And if you want where the big platforms are in terms of development talent and developers working on the solution and scaling it up, you are almost dead on arrival. It was a good experience because I learned from that experience that as a founder, you also have to have the ability to eliminate problems as soon as you can, but also identify when you don't have a new answer to an old question really, really quickly. And that's the time to fold the startup. I think many entrepreneurs, because your startup is like your baby, don't have the ability to just move on to the next thing, because now you can't generate a new answer to this old problem. If you've tried a couple of permutations, it doesn't mean that the problem is unsolvable. It means that you and your team and the way that your company is configured in the market may not be the right team to solve that. And so we moved on from Streamodo as a result of that after about 2 years of trying. I'm extremely proud of the work that we did. And I think that in the future, there may still be some interesting things to be done there. But skincare, is an interesting thing, because skincare is a big business in South Africa and on the African continent. And as I said, for me, I look at opportunities and problems and decide if there is a business there. And after I'd gone through all of the questions of whether or not we can validate that there's a market, I was satisfied that there's something that we could get done here. When we started the company about 3 years ago, artificial intelligence was not as big and as top of our minds as it is now. So really what we were solving at that time was a product problem and a consumer education problem. And so we were at that time and still are modestly a small company. But what is exciting now about artificial intelligence and what's happening there, and if I may just speak about two things. The first aspect of this is that as a small company, it's made us way more effective because artificial intelligence gives the team superpowers. What used to take us 2 weeks to work on, if we think just about content, social media, copy for the website and the blog, creative for Facebook or Instagram ads or TikTok ads, suddenly we can do a lot more than we used to be able to do. And in actual fact, for small companies, it becomes an exciting time because as small businesses, we don't have legacy systems. Whereas in other more matured markets in the world, companies are sizing their teams down and they're cutting employees down because they can do more with artificial intelligence. For us, we're excited now because one person does not equal one person equals 10. So if we hire more, we can get on equal footing much quicker. So internally, it's really been a game changer.
Yeah.
But as I say, we got excited when we saw what the likes of ChatGPT and Gemini from Google were doing, and we wondered how we could empower consumers to do that. But as I said, again, part of a good skill set of the founding team is to not fall in love with your solution.
Yeah.
So if you assume that you are building something, let the market say yes or no. So we just tested quickly with the market, and it turned out that the market wasn't really looking for a ChatGPT-like thing. Because ChatGPT can do that, right? But what people, the questions that came through the chatbot were really, really interesting. And very quickly we saw that maybe this is a solution here that really empowers the consumer to understand their skin, to also understand if there are any things that could be of concern in terms of what your skin is. The climate on the African continent and in South Africa is also makes it quite interesting because, if I may speak about this, when we train large language models, a lot of that data is data that is trained using a certain data set from a certain population. And there's not a lot of data that we can use to train large language models for brown and darker skincare. So whereas we started off thinking we were solving one problem that people will come and say, can I use this face cream or that face cream? Suddenly a much more different thing that we're building here. And as a result, we're facing much more different problems. If you asked me at the beginning of the year if I'd spend time talking to international companies, trying to get data to feed a large language model to cater for brown skin, darker shades skin, I wouldn't have said so. However, it is part of what you should do as a founder. You keep listening to the market and you keep pivoting. Don't fall in love with your solution, fall in love with the problem and try to solve that problem. So as I say, artificial intelligence is really something we're excited about. And before the end of the year, we're working really hard if we can solve the problems of accessing data, because what we are now having to do is we're now having to generate our own native data. So that becomes a slower process. But we think that the opportunity is large enough for us to invest capital invest in talent to build that out. Even if it's the slower way of doing it, we think that there is some value there.
Thank you very much. Invest. Don't fall in love with solutions. Fall in love with the problem and find out the solution. I like that statement.
Absolutely.
Itu, like I said, you're a creative innovator, and on that note, I want to know what actually or what personal experiences or challenges shape the way you approach innovations in your startup or entrepreneurship journey today.
Yeah, if you ask me about what personal experiences shape the way I look at innovation, the personal experiences come down to failure, if I'm being honest with you.
Okay.
Because if you think about, entrepreneurs are notorious for having very big egos. Now, that means that you go into the market thinking there's a problem in the market and this is how we're going to solve it. Mm-hmm. Well, how Facebook, Instagram, Google, all of the other Western companies solve problems for the Western market has been popularized by Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And so because we are inspired by some of those amazing founders that we look at, we then tend to, especially I see this in first-time founders of first-time companies, they tend to approach African problems using a Hollywood lens to them. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, except that if you think about a problem that a software company in America would be solving using a mobile application, and let's pick healthcare, for example, and you're trying to help pregnant women access information about when to go to the clinic, what medications to pick up at the clinic, and you try to roll it out using a mobile application in Africa, well, you may get the shock of your life to realize that the technology may not work on the African continent, because the African continent, even though it's one of the largest markets of smartphones, these are entry-level smartphones. What does that mean as an innovator? It means that you have to then understand that the problem still exists. The problem is that you're trying to get pregnant mothers information that is timely to their cell phones. But it means that you have to let go of your desire to develop a mobile application and think about maybe you are solving the problem using SMS or USSD, or surprisingly, we've learned WhatsApp. Big on the African continent. So it means that your solution then lacks a certain level of sophistication because it's not as great as a mobile app. It doesn't have the bells and the whistles. But there again, innovation is, firstly, is there a problem? Secondly, are you solving the problem in the way that the market needs the problem solved? Mm-hmm. So innovation is that. I've committed many mistakes in my life, in my startup life, cost me and my co-founders thousands and thousands of rands, failing. But I think even though one has a long way to go in terms of learning, at least one at this juncture knows that there is no innovation without the problem. Yeah. To go a step further, you don't innovate based on the way that you think the market needs. I think it was Steve Jobs who said the market doesn't know what it needs. You show the market. Well, I mean, Steve Jobs was Steve Jobs, and God bless him, but I respectfully don't think that that's correct. We've learned the hard way that the market is ultimately the king. Mm-hmm. You solve the problem, you innovate by listening to the market. Mm-hmm. And if you don't listen to the market simply will punish you by not buying your product and ultimately drive you out of business, regardless of how great you think your innovation is.
Yeah, that's so nice. You spoke about like skin tone, reinventing skin care. especially creams, through AI. And I found the idea very interesting how you do it, because of course, in Africa, we use a lot of different types of creams. Mostly maybe because we have dark skins, maybe to get like light skins. And then those are used with chemicals that could get you skin cancers and so on. So the fact that you use AI to analyze your skin tone first, and then you know what kind of skin type you have, because I think most people, with all due respect, didn't really know the type of skin that we have and the kind of cream that really work best with this, whether it's dry skin, whether it's oily skin and all of that. So I find the idea super interesting, first to analyze what kind of skin type do you have and what kind of cream works well with this, to avoid issues like cancer and so on. But then, however, I wanted to ask, how do you ensure that your products and technology are inclusive, especially in diverse continents like Africa, where skin tones, like I said, and types and conditions vary widely?
Well, yeah, that's it's interesting question, and it's one that we are excited about because, again, one of the benefits of being a small company using artificial intelligence, almost making the company AI native, means that you think about the problem from the ground up. Inclusivity or inclusion is important for us because I would say about 85% of our market is black and brown skin. Mm-hmm. And so that changes our thinking altogether because first and foremost, most of the data around skin cancers out there, the data that you are able to purchase to be able to train the LLMs in the first place is data that is exclusive. So what does that mean? It means that then you have to go and solve for the problem of data because large language models are simply the outputs of their training data. So large language models really are as good as the training data that is used to train the model. Mm-hmm. So we are then talking to as many research companies as we can to be able to get data and samples for black and brown skin because we should solve that, right? It doesn't help us to build an AI solution that only represents what is 20% of the market. There's nothing wrong with that, but we feel like artificial intelligence has opened the opportunity up for us, and South Africa is not our only market now. Africa as a whole is our market. So we think about what the market looks like in Africa, and we're solving for that. Mm-hmm. So inclusivity is not just a business objective of ours, it's the very heart and soul of what we do. Because of the fact that this is what the market looks like for us, if we don't build the solution in a way that reflects what the market looks like, the market is going to punish us, and I'm afraid we don't then have a great future if we're trying to build it that way. I think also an interesting thing about this concept of inclusivity. In skincare, if you just study big brands all over the world and think about the kind of face that comes to your mind when you think about a skincare company, almost always that face has got makeup. The marketing and the creative used is very photoshopped, so much so that the model in the picture does not look like the model herself. So what does that mean? It means that how you are marketing is actually not representative of the everyday person. And so you are creating a culture of exclusion by so doing. And we figured this out fairly early, that people have stopped believing in the way that skincare brands advertise. And so people are gravitating towards brands that feel like they are made for people like us. So even though we do touching up on our creative, we try and represent an ordinary woman in our advertising and marketing. Why? Because we want for our solution to not make people feel like there's something wrong with them. All that we're trying to get you to do is to understand your skin, understand your condition at a deeper level, and use our products as part of that journey. We want for people to feel included in our brand story. And so how we market is that Eyam skincare and wellness products are not the hero. Our client is the hero, and we are simply part of their story. And that is how, on a different level, we think about this concept of inclusion. Don't market to exclude people, almost to say, look at us, we are the cool people, we've made it, come join us. So we don't do the whole aspirational thing. We market to the ordinary person because we take it that all of us are facing similar problems, and the more people see themselves in our product, the more they gravitate towards us.
Diversity is important. Speaking of the challenges, AI has a lot of challenges. ChatGPT makes a lot of mistakes. You might ask something and it gives you something different. You have to rework on it. And then I was thinking, how sure are you that AI would effectively analyze my skin? This is not word, but to analyze my skin to tell me what kind of skin type that I have and what kind of cream or oil I'll be needing. On that note, I wanted to ask, it's just on the ethical or practical challenges of using AI in your line of work, especially when it comes to data privacy and trust.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it goes back to the point I made earlier, right? I think we have to do a lot of education around AI. So artificial intelligence is really you speaking to a massive bank of data. That's what you're doing. Now, this data has been trained to figure out probabilities. So as you type into ChatGPT is using tokens to figure out the most probable answer to your question. Now, in order for it to figure out the most probable answer, all that it's doing is it's running an algorithm based on the data that is trained on. So if the data that the large language model is trained on does not represent the fringe of the data set, in other words, marginalized groups, and this doesn't, by the way, apply to only skin, it applies to languages as well. It's very interesting, and I think for your viewers to think about African languages that have forever in the history of the internet been underrepresented. What does that mean? Can you talk to ChatGPT in Kiswahili and it give you the same quality answer as in English? Very interesting use case. But the principle there is the same. The quality of the data that is used for the large language model training is what is going to represent the quality of the answer that you get. So then let's talk about accuracy levels. That's the very reason why we're taking a bit of a while, surprisingly to us, to launch our own solution, because you have to access good quality data and go through various iterations of training and checking with the market. So we place our accuracy levels at around 70 or 75%. Now, for something as critical as this, I think you'd be wanting to get on the north of 95% to have fair confidence that this could work. Why? Because a person can take their camera and scan themselves, and what is just a dark patch, get a false answer, and then you create a false alarm for the person. So those are the things you don't want.
Yeah. So Africa is often seen as a consumer rather than a creator of technology. How do you see this narrative changing in your own perspective?
Well, the narrative is already changing. I think there are a lot of companies which on the African continent have done really well. I think there are about 5 unicorns on the African continent, if not 6. albeit that many of them are in the Fintech space. I think that the answer to that question is that Africa is proving that African entrepreneurs are resourceful, African entrepreneurs are capable, and with the right tools, African entrepreneurs can compete on a global stage. To close the loop on the answer that I was just completing just now, because of the fact that the African startup is competing on a global scale now, things like ethical usage of AI have been mandatory because of the available addressable market. It's not just a small component of our own target audience. It means someone in Germany can go to our website and use our solution now, and we have to be careful around that. So to really just conclude this answer, I think African entrepreneurs are proving that African entrepreneurs, African startups are capable of solving African problems. That Africa is moving away really from the narrative of aid, and African entrepreneurs want to trade with the rest of the world. We have got extremely talented technical developers. We've got extremely talented founders of companies, and we've got the largest youth bulge. What does that mean? That in the next half a decade to a decade, the productive base of human resources and human capital on the African continent will either be a missed opportunity or will be a resounding success, purely based on how we decide to move forward, not just from startup world, but governments as well. Policymakers are very important in this discussion. Our counterparts in the rest of the world. How about we partner? If Facebook is trying to penetrate the African market, there are startups that are here, and we'd like to have a chat with Mark Zuckerberg.
Thank you very much. I mean, how do you think non-Africans, especially the Western world, perceive Africa? Let's say when it comes to entrepreneurship.
Well, I certainly think that the narrative is changing. I have the privilege of engaging with a lot of other startup founders from the West as well, through many amazing programs. And I think that because of the fact that the world is not as big or doesn't feel as big as it used to before the internet, suddenly we are exposed to a level playing field. So I think that if we overcome the main narrative that's in the news and the political discourse, and we look at what the underlying potential is for Africa, we very quickly come to a different conclusion, that maybe the people in the world who are builders, who are makers, who are change makers, aren't really worried that you are from South Africa or Kenya or Uganda or Zimbabwe. Is your startup competitive? Are you solving a real problem, and do you have real users? If you go through those things, I'm tending to find that more and more of the interactions that I'm in have got less to do with being an African startup founder and more to do with a founder who is talented, who's capable, and who's solving a real problem.
Yeah. Like I said, this series is actually about reshaping the image of Africa or giving it a new image. How do you think an entrepreneur like yourself are doing that through tech and innovation? I mean, how are you reshaping the new image of Africa through tech and innovation?
Well, one of the things that we are starting to do a lot because of the advent of social media is that African entrepreneurs are owning their narrative. So the world is not telling the narrative of Africa anymore, and African entrepreneurs can give the world front row viewing of how we're building the startups that we're building, how we're solving the problems that we're solving. That on its own is a very big thing, because for a long time, the story of Africa has not been told through an African lens. And as a result, because of that, much of the story of Africa was watered down, was edited to create a certain narrative. Whether good or bad, and the politics around that are beyond this conversation. But what we definitely are seeing, the evidence is the fact that I'm here talking to you in Johannesburg and talking to a German audience is amazing enough, because it means that we get to say, we would like for the world to partner with us. And because what we are doing is working here, we would like opportunities to meet investors, to get access to markets in other audiences. We are not naive to the fact that all of this is very long-term and it takes a lot of time to be able to build out. But we're patient. We understand how to build. We know how to create solutions for markets, and we want to be able to partner with the world. So the idea of creating a new image of Africa is a collaborative effort. The world has got to allow Africa to use its own voice. Africa has to show up and speak. African entrepreneurs have got to show up on the global stage. African entrepreneurs have got to work hard in taking charge of their own narrative. And we are excited at opportunities like this opportunity to be able to engage with you about how we feel about that. It's undoubtable that Africa is creating a new image, but I think that it's an invitation to you as well. There are many, many other founders, not just in South Africa, but in sub-Saharan Africa, who are on my WhatsApp. They are a text away, and I would love for them to come onto your platform and talk to you.
Why not? I'm always open and happy to feature innovators like you, talents that are actually reshaping not just Africa, but that are reshaping the globe on so many perspectives, from entrepreneurship, from migration, from empowerment, politics, and so on. So I'll be happy to talk to them. Let's stay in touch. Speaking of a global perspective, I mean, what ways do you think can the global tech and business world better support or partner with African innovators like yourself?
Yeah, I think that what we're looking at is to try and level the participation field for African companies. And what that looks like is investment. Companies require capital, and companies require human capital. And what we're seeing now is that investment is an interesting conversation, because investment is designed for a world past, for an old world. So what actually should happen is that more and more venture capitalists, private equity, and the larger tech titans should be thinking about the African continent as still a little underdeveloped. So it means that investment has to be a little more patient. So a tech company in South Africa or in Africa may take a little longer to catch up, because it's not just does the company have technical talent to solve the problem, it's also the readiness of the market itself. So you are solving two problems at the same time. You've got to get the market ready and to catch up with the rest of the world, and you got to back, as it were, the team that's solving this problem. If we get those two things right, I think we're well on our way. So yes, I think the conversation is still a little bit imbalanced right now, but I'm seeing much more participation and collaboration in terms of technical capabilities. For example, there is a program that we are also part of here, who have said we won't invest directly in the company, but because it's a large tech company, they are making technical skills available for us, and they're making cloud credits available for us. And that means that we as a company then can tap into that ecosystem of developers and technical talent and move that much quicker. And I think that model is representative of how the world should be talking to African entrepreneurs. African entrepreneurs aren't really looking for handouts, but African entrepreneurs are saying, we have come so far using the little that we have. Imagine with collaboration how far we could go and how we all can win, because Africa truly is the last frontier.
Africa is truly the last frontier. On that note, we go back to Eyam skincare again. And I'm interested to know, like, what is the most surprising insight you have learned from launching Eyam?
The most surprising insight would be that you can be a male founder of a skincare company that predominantly services females. Now, when I started, I still thought that there'd be a bit of a problem with that, but it turns out that the customer is interested in their own problem. And if you solve their problem, they will come back and buy. And I mean, if I look at all of our analytics, 60, maybe 65% of our customers are return customers. And that tells us something, that out of 10 people, 6.5 come back and buy from us the following month. And that's a very interesting thing. So that's been one surprising insight. The other surprising insight is also how available the African market still is. And I think that perhaps because of the borderization of Africa, many of us, wrongly so, still think of Africa as little, small countries. Whereas where the world is now is Africa should be seen as one big continent that is available for African founders. There are things like the Africa Free Trade Zone that are really exciting on the policy front. We also recognize that it's still very expensive to move products from one country to another in Africa. But for us, that is a problem that is worthwhile solving. So we are making ourselves available to participate in all of the conversations that formulate part of those policy changes. So it has been surprising. It's a surprising insight to look at how vastly available the African market still is. That we are learning now that, you know, if we are talking to the right doors and knocking on the right doors in the continent, that you can indeed penetrate the African continent. I think it's been really surprising for us, even as the largest skincare market on the African continent, and it's an exciting prospect.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask, I mean, of course you sell online, so how is your clientele base outside South Africa? I mean, do you also intend, you spoke of partnership, do you also intend to partner beyond South Africa and, let's say, globally outside?
We definitely intend to partner. We are having those conversations already. For us being on the southern tip of Africa, we chose the easier path to go. So right now we're talking to Namibia, and just further up, we're talking to partners, retail partners in Botswana. And this is where the tricky bit of selling product online comes in, because now you are not just talking about shipping product locally. Suddenly it's a whole operation about moving product across borders and all of the currency exchanges that are involved. Because even though Namibia is just next door to South Africa, you're talking about two currencies that have now got to speak. So it's a very, very difficult challenge. Again, you know, we're not afraid of hard work. We think that these are exciting times. We consider ourselves fortunate to even have that as an opportunity. So yes, in the last 3 years of the company, South Africa has been our primary market. But as I say, you know, we are beginning to look more and more at Africa as available. And anyone also in the global space who is watching this interview who thinks that this is interesting, more than welcome to chat to us. we would love to see if there are any opportunities to get some Eyam skincare and wellness in your country. We've got great reviews. Our products are effective, organic products, zero parabens. And so we really are excited about that. So we are looking at other countries on the African continent. The two that are sitting on my desk immediately, Namibia and Botswana, very interesting, but the problems are hard because traditionally African countries have not been great at trading with each other. But we've got positive hope that is changing, and we want to be a participant in that change.
Hopefully. So something just popped in my mind, and that is like, so usually in Africa, when you speak of skincare, it's usually women leading. Do you have any backlashes in a sense of like a man leading a skincare product that actually perhaps is a women penetrated space, and as a woman maybe I feel comfortable speaking to a woman than a man? Maybe I'm seeing an example that, oh, you've also used this cream, how does it work, and all of that. Usually men do not really pay much attention. I mean, some already, but I think majority of men do not really pay attention to skincare routines as women would do. Do you have any backlashes, in terms of clientele base that, is a men's space or men leading for women?
Surprisingly not, Nyima, no.
Not in South Africa, yeah.
The client is interested in whether or not you're solving their problem.
Yeah.
If they're a price-sensitive client, they're looking at the price. Does it fit their budget? Of course, I wouldn't put my face on the marketing of the company. I'm not as nice looking as that, but there isn't that. And I mean, we also know there are a couple of other brands in the South African market that are led and owned and managed by male founders. So I think that just speaks to the fact that the consumer base really is product conscious. That's what it boils down to. It's about the quality of the product and whether the product works for the consumer. I also do believe that as part of the journey of the company over time, as a succession plan, I do believe that we want to empower more female leaders. Yeah. It's not just our agenda as a company. It's part of a global objective to empower more females to get in more leadership roles of companies. And again, I'm very, very aware of that. Yeah. So when the time comes, I think the next CEO of Eyam Skincare and Wellness, very, very likely, and these discussions are ongoing, will be a female, not only because the market is predominantly female, but I think that it's our duty, it's our obligation to make empowerment an important part of how we do business, not just what we say in terms of our inclusivity slogans, but it should be in practice as well.
We have 5 minutes to wrap up, and I have like two questions or 2.5 questions. So the half question is, like, let's say I am in Berlin and I'm interested in your product, and but then I first want to analyze my skin tone to know what kind of cream that I would be needing. How will I connect to the AI, driven thing that would analyze my skin? Like, how do you have this conversation with your customers for the person to know first?
Great question. So at the time of airing of this interview, we perhaps won't be online with the solution, but over time, but certainly before the end of 2025, what our customers both on the website end and on a different footing on a mobile solution are going to be able to do is they're going to be able to log on to our platform, take a couple of selfies from different angles, using their smartphone, upload those images to the platform and let it think for some time. What will then happen is that the platform will return some results to you and do some validation. So upfront, what we're trying to do is we're not trying to say, we think that this is your problem, but we're trying to build the platform so that it's more collaborative with the user, and asks a couple of other questions based on what the most probable issue may be with this client, to also go through a second step of validation. And right now, I should say that we're really not thinking about it as a way to upsell our products, but as a way to empower the user to understand their skin. And I think it's a very important distinction to make, Nyima, that we think the opportunity is bigger than just selling more skincare.
Yeah.
We think the opportunity is democratizing digital healthcare for the African continent. We really, really think so. So we want to eliminate the need for someone who's in Uganda, in Kenya, to have to now go and say, okay, now I'm going to buy this product. It will be a small part of the solution. But we think a bigger thing here is how are we going to use artificial intelligence to democratize digital healthcare? If you can do that analysis of someone's skin, a simple technology like the smartphone camera, what else can you use the smartphone camera to do to analyze other conditions of the customer? For me, that's the opportunity here.
That's an opportunity.
It's a massive.
Yeah, that's an opportunity. Unfortunately, I have to cut you there. We have like less than 3 minutes. And in few seconds or less than 1 minute, you spoke about failure. To be successful, you need to be willing to fail first. And in your own personal view, how do you, take up setbacks and failures in your career? How do you personally handle failure and setbacks?
I think that in the world that we're in, we speak about it this way. Failure is not a bug, it's a feature. So failure is an indication that you move forward. It's not an indication that something is inherently wrong. So you don't fail when you get it wrong. You fail when you throw in the towel. So as long as you're willing to wake up another day and you're willing to work on the problem, you haven't really failed. You've just discovered one more way how not to do it. So it's a lesson that all founders should learn. You should have high tolerance for failure. You should train yourself to be more lenient on your team, encourage your team to fail. And that's how great companies are built. Many failures.
And finally, what advice would you give to a young African who actually have an idea or a solution but don't know how to start? Like in 30 seconds.
Well, in 30 seconds, I'd say start. Version number 1 of anything is hardly ever the answer. The answer is version number 3 or 4 or 5. So how do you get to version number 3 or 4 or 5? Is to start, discover the truth from the market, pivot, implement, pivot, implement. So the answer is start. Don't be precious on ideas, be urgent on execution.
Thank you very much, Itu Mamasedi. Start, and that's all what you need to start if you have an idea. That's all we have for you on Reinventing Beauty and Tech through AI, innovation, and resilience in Africa's digital economy. My guest was Itu Mamasedi, a South African entrepreneur who is actually, changing narrative through technology, especially on artificial intelligence, using AI-driven skincare through his company, Eyam Skincare. Thank you so very much, Itu, for joining us. Das war's von unserer heutigen Sendung Unfiltered Podcast. Mit mir zusammen ist Itu Mamasedi, ein südafrikanischer Entrepreneur, der künstliche Intelligenz nutzt, seine innovative Business weiter zu entwickeln. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss. Join us for another exciting edition on this threefold interview series that we are doing to actually unveil and give Africa a new image together with the Friedrich Naumann Foundation. It's a bye from me. Until I meet next time. Thank you.